Welcome to I've Never Read Discworld. This is the voice of Andy Luke, who has never read most Discworld. I'm wearing a tie tonight because it's opera night. Here's my co-host.
This is PJ Hart, who has read most Discworld, unfortunately not wearing a necktie for the occasion. I did get a haircut though, if that counts.
Show the peepers the fancy cut with this.
I mean, if you're not watching, if you're not a video viewer, you're missing out here, obviously. So that's the extent of my respectability in terms of the opera. So in case you've somehow managed to click on this episode without reading the title, that was a clue. Andy will tell us the name of the book that we're discussing.
We are reading Maskerade, which I believe is book 18.
Yeah, wow, 18. We're fast approaching 20, which is almost halfway. Although we're fast approaching almost halfway, which means we're nowhere near halfway. But we are in that mid-90s by now.
Yep, 95. What's interesting about this period in culture, we have Pablo Pavarotti? No, Pavarotti, the grand opera singer who left.
I like that you take a swing on Pavarotti's first name and then looked at me like I would know. It's like, absolutely not.
Pavarotti was a massive deal culturally. So
yeah. I thought he was like Madonna. He only has one name,
We've got a Madonna link for later in this podcast.
Yeah, sorry, don't want to bury the lead. Sorry, carry on talking about Pavarotti.
Right. 1990 World Cup, Nessa Dorma was the famous opera number. Not just for that year, but for the whole of the 90s from 1990. Pavarotti was everywhere. You could not ignore the guy, and it was usually Nessa Dorma he was associated with. So Maskerade seemed very apt. Opera certainly had a renaissance in the 90s.
Yeah, it's a good point. I thought something I'd immediately considered, but I mean, obviously when you read the book, there's at least one character who you're immediately picturing as Pavarotti, for sure. And yeah, that's one of those 90s cultural touchstones that is buried so deep in the back of my mind that I hadn't even really thought about Pavarotti. I can't remember the last time I thought about Pavarotti. Is he still alive?
I think 2014 he died.
That's a shame.
It wasn't so long ago.
Not so long ago, but yeah. So there you go. Yeah, that
I'm glad you did. Dorma? Can you sing any of it?
Absolutely not a chance.
I think that's how it went.
Yeah, it sounds about right to me. I can't even sing Happy Birthday. But that's I hadn't really realized that was the 1990 World Cup. That was ground zero for that. I was only 4 years old at the time, I suppose. Because probably, just as you're saying, that there was a bit of opera in the air in the 90s. This probably would have been my first specific exposure to it as a tangible thing rather than just something that's in the ether or whatever. And I guess I probably would have read it in the early 2000s and knew nothing about opera. Didn't even really know anything about musical theater. I remember my mom was kind of into Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes, that was another one that was everywhere for a while.
It was big around the same time, I think, or certainly would have been big around the time this book came out. And that would have been the extent of it, I think. Well, and the Iron Maiden song, Phantom of the Opera, which I remember trying to learn how to play on bass guitar. Very, very difficult.
You put that in the show notes, and I thought you meant the Andrew Lloyd Webber version.
Oh no,
which I couldn't really wrap my head around.
Yeah, that would be quite something. No, I think it's on Iron Maiden's debut album. They have a track called Phantom of the Opera, and all their songs are written by their bass player, and he's got these really, really crazy bass riffs. So I remember I was in a metal band, and I spent a long, long time learning how to play that. It's not a great story, but that was the sort of extent of my exposure probably to that world. And I sort of feel like there's a bit of a pattern emerging probably at this point with the witches books where they're parodying genres that I wasn't ready for at this stage in my life. They've done Shakespeare, They're doing opera. I'm just like sitting here. I'm 14 years old, going like, when are you gonna do the vampires?
They
Like,
do tend
when's
to
that?
gravitate towards high society, don't they?
Oh well, I mean, and it was dragging me up, I suppose, because like I knew, I was in the Discworld and I was buying whatever Discworld books I could find, and then like occasionally it was going to be a city watch kind of hard boiled detective thing with jokes in the big city, or occasionally it was going to be about opera or Shakespeare, and you just rolled the dice, just bought whatever book I could get my hands on, regardless. So I managed to keep my hard copy of this for quite a long time. Weirdly, it hasn't survived the move to this office, but I remember seeing it lying around at least within the last 5 or 6 years. So I know I did have a copy of it, and I'm obviously read it at least once. And something I'm noticing as I go back and reread these is that like certainly the first act, sometimes the first half of the books, I just don't recall. And then when it picks up, if there's a good midpoint twist or something like that, then all the memories kind of come flooding back. And it was a similar sort of experience with this. And I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it more this time for sure. I got a lot more of the references. I'm a bit more invested in the characters because we're reading them in order and stuff. And I've probably taken this from like a 6 out of 10 for me, because I think 6 is like the baseline. The very worst Terry Pratchett book is still a 6 out of 10. And it's probably taken it up to like an 8, I guess.
Okay, yeah. I hope I can help you out because I, in preparation, prepared for it.
Oh, awesome. Look at Andy doing his homework. Did all your preparation enrich your reading experience?
Yeah, yeah, it really, really added to it. I'll talk more about my watch of Phantom of the Opera when we get there. But I come from a sort of a place where I've enjoyed opera over the last few years as kind of a light hobby.
Oh, cool.
Um, so I guess this goes back about 8 years maybe when I was working on a story about a pickpocket in the 1880s, 1890s who works around the theater in is it Vienna possibly or Austria, Hungary. Um, but there's a riot breaks out at a gig by composer Gustav Mahler. So
Mm.
as part of the work for this, I watched Don Giovanni. I
Oh,
read
wow.
uh, Wagner's librettos, libretto being a script for an opera for the Ring Cycle, which is 4 books of High German legends written into this quartet. I couldn't recall them offhand. Das Rheingold is the first one. Um, and the last one is Twilight of the Gods. So it gives you some sort of idea. There's probably a Lord of the Rings link in. And I was part of the Farsight Labs Makerspace Opera Club just before
Oh,
pandemic.
wow.
We would meet every Sunday in the hackerspace and we would bring on cake and wine and set up a row of tables. And I think we started out sort of mainly attempting to sort of maybe dress up a bit nice, but very quickly became quite casual and, eating cake with our hands and
And
uh,
where does the opera fit into this? Were you performing opera? Were
so, oh
you?
yeah, we got we just Farsight has a massive screen that comes down from the ceiling, and
Uh-huh.
um, there's a opera platform. There's a number of opera platforms online, free, that will live stream opera or have recorded opera from great European venues. Um, I should have really looked up the name of this one. I've got opera.eu in my head, or something like that. But well worth looking into if you fancy a bit of opera. You'll get
As you
some
do.
really professional stuff online. Yeah.
I mean, I get the feeling, having heard about all your opera bona fides, that your reaction to the book is going to be positive.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Now, I hadn't got Phantom of the Opera stuff when I started. I'll come on to that later.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, that all that stuff really helped with the book. I found it quite readable. Like it's a witches. I knew I was gonna enjoy it, right? I thought a lot of the other characters are quite accessible. Like particularly like we'll come on to chatting in the first part, Bucket and Salzilla.
Indeed. Yeah.
Um, you've got consistent shenanigans going on and good pun quality. Um, you've got some really good set pieces, one in particular. Um, and yeah, oh, just one thing I noticed that we forgot to bring up when we were talking about interesting times.
Oh.
Um, it went for very long scenes,
Mm,
sometimes on average of about 10 pages.
yeah.
And Maskerade is a bit different in format as well, as I believe you half noticed. There's
Oh.
very few footnotes. There's like three, maybe four footnotes in Maskerade.
You say that. The version I read had zero footnotes. Yeah, so I noticed about halfway through that there had been none, and I was reading a downloaded version on my tablet because I bought a legitimate version of this book, so it doesn't count as piracy. And I was like, "There's no footnotes in this," and I think it's just a literal mistake in the file. So that's interesting that the legitimate version only has a half dozen or less. Yeah.
It could be they're missing entirely, or it could be that because there's so few, they're actually planted in the text.
Yeah, usually I get like a little, like tiny blue asterisk, and it takes me like 5 or 6 goes to stab it before it brings up a footnote, and then I have to stab it again to bring me back to the text. So, I mean, I didn't miss them as much as I thought I would, but yeah, that's interesting then that there was fewer across the board. Shall we dive in then? Start talking about some
Yeah.
specifics.
A quick recap if you haven't been following the conversation. The show must go on as murder, music, and mayhem run riot in the night. That's the big back cover blurb from Masquerade, but I think most people would be here. So let's dive straight into the synopses. Um, so I'll take the top one of five, in which Agnes, now Potato, gets a job at the opera under Misters Bucket and Salzella and meets Christine, a small fluffy animal. Nanny Ogg learns of her fortunes by letters and sees something in the tea leaves. She has also become a published best-selling author, minus royalties, and the witches commandeer a coach to Ankh-Morpork. An accident at the opera house triggers fears it might be the ghost, and death tricks a swan. Okay.
Sorry for the dramatic pause there. I just had to cough. So setting up, like, is the band going to get back together? That felt like the first really big question for me this time, having now properly read the Witches books in order. That the coven of three has been reduced to two due to the events of previous books. So who's going to fill the gap? And that's a great question because I think when we talked about it before with, I guess, lords and ladies, that
Hmm.
that could have potentially have been the end of that storyline because the coven did break up. They defeated quite a big existential threat, and that might have been the end of that. So even just as like a proposition for a story, like were you interested in that? Were you like, oh
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I remember asking the question at the time.
mm,
What's going on? Is Margaret coming back? Are they splitting up? Um, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a fairly small. It's an ever lingering thing, the threeism of it in Masquerade, but it's fairly small as a story thing. So I'm not going to go into it here. And that I I was surprised that Granny and Nanny got on so well together when left to themselves. They managed to stay fairly at good length from strangling each other because this is for the
yeah,
most part a twoism.
yeah, that's true. It has always sort of been hinted that they need that dynamic of three witches to kind of keep the peace, but if anything, they were probably more at odds in Witches Abroad potentially when they were on the journey, which is interesting. But I also suppose the flip side of that is that they knew each other for a long time, even before Magrat came along, and they've just kind of reverted back to that. But Nani at least seems to feel that the clock on that is ticking, and she's mostly concerned for Granny, and that Granny might go off the deep end, I guess, and start cooking children in the gingerbread oven or whatever.
Down the Black Alice path.
Indeed. Yeah. So like yeah, I buy that as a motivation. I think bringing back Agnes, out of all those kind of supporting younger wannabe witches from Lords and Ladies, probably was the most interesting. And I get a hint from rereading this that he possibly already had that in mind when he created those characters, and
yeah, she was quite a prominent character from that clique of teen goths.
yeah, and a bit more fleshed out, I guess. And to send her off to the big city and then to send the witches after is a good way to get them, because we've done witches abroad, but I think like we now have these two really well established worlds of Ljerka and Ankh-Morpork, and it's about time. Like they've sort of glanced off each other a few times, but it's time that the witches kind of came to the big city and really got stuck in for a whole story. So yeah, definitely reading them in order in relatively quick succession this time around has enhanced all that for me, for sure. I mean, the flip side of that is my one kind of criticism of this is that the sort of slightly blunt way that Terry writes about young girls and their weight and their looks, sort of a similar thing with Isabel in Mort, kind of put me off a little bit in a way that I don't think it would have the first time around. I think it's more about my kind of sensibilities, just personal taste thing maybe, really. But I think the fact that there's a bit of a split personality thing going on with like Agnes Perdita or whatever, that sort of softens it a bit, because like the character herself is being quite self-critical and self-referential, and that makes it feel a bit less voyeuristic or something, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
But
yeah, I certainly didn't have a problem with that if measuring it against the treatment of Isabel. And I think being a fat person myself gives me a bit of insight on that.
no comment.
Yeah, because we are, well, not every fat person is critical of their fat, but most of us are. I mean, a good deal of it. There's a element
There's
of
more,
big is beautiful, more to love.
and the fact that we're in the world of opera and there's obviously specific tropes associated with that.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm being critical just for the sake of something to be critical about, probably. But
Well, then you have to. I mean, that's a really good thing that in to pick up on, that it is about opera, and that kind of undermines that argument, because
yeah,
you have the fatty being sort of held out of view in preference to the slimmer, more typically pretty
yeah,
actress who is taking all the credit for the hard work.
and that is
And
held
that
up in the book
speaks to,
as a change within this world of the story. They're all saying that the old dames of the opera were like, as we would imagine, the big classic, larger people performers, and then the male, the Pavarotti analog character is obviously the same. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I just think sometimes her kind of the way her internal monologue about it is written, I think feels, I don't know, something about it just sort of I find a little bit off-putting, but I don't know. Yeah, I get the feeling I'm in the minority on that one. So
I had a very sort of noisy, busy kind of month trying to read this book. It wasn't overwhelmingly great experience, but that's less the book's fault than it is the rest of the world. It kept distracting me from reading the book. I really so I had some issues trying to grab the Agnes / Perdita things. Less Perdita.
I don't know. I
That's
tend to
great
say,
characters now.
I know I tend to say Perdita, but I've no reason for that.
I'll just fall into line with Perdita unless I forget. So I usually get quite irate when authors have two names for the same characters, but it felt quite at home this time. I think showing us Perdita's whole journey in Ankh-Morpork before the witches show up, give us some more establishment to this character before she joins the triumvirate at the end of the book.
Mm.
I appreciate that, and we've also got another younger character. But it seems like I'm jumping right to the end of the book here, if you don't mind.
By all means.
We have what's her name? Magrad. She's gone now, I've forgotten her
Yeah,
name.
yeah. Who's
Magrat
that?
and
Who's
Granny.
that?
Always at loggerheads.
Yeah.
And it looks like Perdita might fall under Granny's compliance far more quickly. But I suspect she's still going to be a source of conflict, and I wonder, is it going to go the other way with her butting heads with Nani?
Yeah, well, we shall have to wait and
Grand
see.
socialite. But there's so much else to be talking about before then. And
Indeed.
what else have we got?
Establishing the world of the opera house, because it's quite a lot to establish in terms of the fact that there even is an opera house in Ankh-Morpork. I think we've seen the outside of it before, briefly, in soul music. But to be introduced to its inner workings, musical director, owner, and its various cast of characters, to even take a character like Agnes, who we've established in Ljerka, bring her to Ankh-Morpork, and establish everything else that's going back on in Ljerka between Nanny and Granny and their dynamic. Like, to get all that kind of set up and off to the races feels like a lot to take on, but it's handled really, really well. I think the familiarity we have as readers with these characters, and that Terry now has with writing them, his shorthand with writing these characters is so self-assured. There's very little, even though that all feels like setup, it also weirdly feels like we are just dropped in the middle of it, and like this just happens to be what's going on in all these characters' lives at that given moment in time. And that leads us really where we want to be, and where we always knew we were gonna be probably, which is Granny and Nanny heading to Ankh-Morpork on the coach. Well, do you want to say anything else about Bucket and Salzella before I read the next?
So for about half of the book, I had this mistake in mind regarding Bucket, which I think a number of other people had, that he is related, or he was a character that we saw in a previous book with the occult set, maybe Reaper Man. Two-Man Bucket, is that the character's name? So
I'm shaking my head. Unfortunately, my semi-encyclopedic knowledge of Discworld is failing me on this occasion.
Two-Man Bucket is one of the spirits that Mrs. Cake, the psychic,
Oh yes,
contacts. So
of
I had
course.
seldom buckets in my head, as I couldn't quite remember that fact about who Two-Man Bucket was, or who Bucket was generally, but I thought it was the same character. So I, even though I couldn't remember the character, so I associated an occult esoteric notion with Seldom Bucket,
Got it.
which
Okay.
kind of was misleading, but added to the atmosphere here. It didn't do it any damage. I was halfway through the book before I give it a quick Google.
Gotcha. Yeah, didn't it? That totally passed me by.
They have
And
they've got quite a good relationship. I think, well, it's not a good relationship, but you can see, they're what they're bringing to it as musical director and an owner, and the varied interests here.
yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit actually. That it's a relationship that we've seen played out similarly in Discworld before, with the kind of the business head of a creative endeavor and then the creative head, like in say moving pictures or whatever, where Bucket is he's the money man and Salzella is the creative man. In this, it's sort of got shades of moving pictures, for example. And there's a lot you could put into that sort of similar mold, I suppose. Although this is obviously following a more specific parody rather than a whole kind of genre pastiche. I mean, I didn't know this. I mean, I should have looked it up, but Christine, that's even the name of the protagonist from Phantom of the Opera, right? Like, that's how close we are to following the events of that story.
Yeah, yeah, it's really close in a lot of points. And I'll try and point them out as we get there.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so we just have the ghost running around causing all manner of chaos and stalking Christine, which is yeah, is a big part of Phantom of the Opera. Is pretty much the main sort of byline that there's this ghost peering through the mirror, teaching her how to sing. Um, Also, I think in the musical, confessing sort of undying love for Christine. Um, and that's pretty much what Phantom of the Opera is.
Yeah, I think I mentioned we talked about it briefly when we were starting the read. Where it was just like I sort of feel like I know the gist just purely through osmosis, just from pop culture, from yeah, Iron Maiden songs and Simpsons episodes and things of that nature. So I didn't really feel compelled to go out of my way to do any specific research on it or whatever. And I still thoroughly enjoyed the book as a result. So,
There's been a number
read,
of iterations of it through the ages. It's 1910 novel,
yeah.
a 1925 silent film with the master of horror Lou Lon Chaney Jr., who gets a reference in this book. That was remade in 1929 with audio,
Ooh.
but Chaney was signed to another production company, so he couldn't appear, and it was very famous because he only revealed he did his own horror prosthetics and apparently very striking. And these weren't put out in any of the publicity for it, so it was a shock for the audiences.
They
Um,
pulled the old bait and
they
switch.
they remade it in 4 years later, but he was signed to another production company. So that version had audio, but then all the prints were lost.
Hmm.
So and only the audio survives. So there's been a number of attempts over the years to reconstruct this film. But the big version obviously is 1985 and the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, co-written by Richard Stilgoe, who's pretty much a figure of fun on British TV, as sort of a cuddly jazz Brandreth. So it's really odd to think of him as writing this really sort of classical opera thing.
Yeah, and it's a bit edgy, you know. It's dark, it's got gothic undertones. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Uh,
The only other bit I wanted to talk about in this section was Death tricking a swan into
oh yeah.
singing a musical number. It's a very short, dark, funny little scene. I think it's got a charm all of its own.
Yeah, and it's thematically appropriate, I suppose, because yeah, it's the swan song, and then if you're thinking we're in the opera, and the opera's perhaps not going to end until the fat lady sings, perhaps. Does that imply that when that happens, the fat lady who we know to be Agnes, does that mean that she's going to survive? Because I think it raises the question as to whether Agnes is going to survive the events of the story or not.
Some deep subtext. Hire this man to write something.
No,
And if
yeah,
he's
that's
not
the
available, he probably will be hiring me instead. Swans pop up quite a bit in opera. Well, certainly judging by the ring cycle. I mean,
oh yeah,
all over the place. So yeah, it's a good motif to seize upon.
and what you might call her, what and whatnot, Black Swan. It's a Darren Aronofsky maybe. That's opera slash ballet related, right? He's yeah, and he's making all these like proper opera references and stuff, and I'm like, I saw this movie like 12 years ago with Mila Kunis. That's got swans in it. Um, moving on, what happens in the book? Part two. On the coach to Ankh-Morpork, Greebo and Mr. Slug, who resembles Enrico Basilia, do not make friends. Bucket and Salzella have a long talk about the opera's previous owners, the ghost, box number 8, and the flooded basement. Granny plays poker with death. The mirror talks to Christine. The ghost kills Mr. Pounder, the rat killer. Perdita is offered the lead voice role in the opera. When Dr. Undershaft is murdered, the exclamation marks rack up. The witches arrive in the city, staying at a house of ill repute. And Nanny's publisher is told a lot of people have regretted Esme thinking about what to do next. So get your drinks ready because there's a lot going on in that section.
I'm very proud that I didn't have to look up the L-space annotations to spot box number 5 is the one used in Phantom, not
Oh,
box
nice.
number 8. That's it.
Good knowledge. Yeah.
Doctor
I wonder.
special.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Nice. That's a good move. Yeah, good spot. You're getting so into this now. Now that we're on book 18 and you're fully immersed, you like know what references to look out for and stuff. You're well and truly one of us now. And
Should we go into the course of our pre-episode controversy?
so basically, I threw it in the notes. We were doing the notes last minute, as we always do, and we were going through the sections. And I put in that that the poker game with death didn't really sit right with me because it feels like, first of all, it feels to me like death loses a game on purpose, and that in turn feels like something that death wouldn't do. So I put that in the notes to Andy, and then the first thing he said to me when he came on the call was, "What are you talking about?" So we went over the scene, and he helpfully reread the scene, and Granny deals the cards. Is that correct, Andy?
Granny deals the cards. Death has her switch over the hands.
Yeah. And then Granny is left with a hand of, so it's a hand of poker. As far as I can tell, it's Texas Hold'em, and she has 4 queens. Is that right?
4 queens, yep.
And then Death claims to have lost because he only has 4 ones, but 4 ones in poker is 4 aces, which is poker. That's the hand is called poker. Like that's why the game is called that. So Death should win, but if you fold, regardless of what hand you have, if you fold, you lose that hand. So Death does technically lose the hand by the rules of the game, but he does it on purpose. It feels so. I don't know, and I think I tell you what, the reason it irks me, the main reason it irks me, I think, is because I don't really understand what it says about the story. I don't understand what its kind of thematic purpose is, maybe.
Well, yeah, here's how I feel about it is that it's the best scene in the book. But it's also it's completely unconnected to everything else that goes on in terms of environment, in terms of theme.
Yeah, see, that's what makes my brain itchy. I can't divide that. It's like everything has to. If it's not connected, it shouldn't be in the book. Even if it is just like a tonal cue, or if it's something thematic, or it's some kind of subtext, I think it has to earn its place, and I'm sure it does earn its place. I'm sure.
So,
Hopefully, somebody will be able to tell
I guess
us what that is.
it absolutely worked for me. And as I said, as PJ said, what are you talking about, man? So I lose, he folds, 4 ones. Is his line. You say 4 aces. So what we really need is one of these Discworld nerds who've poured over everything in every bit of trivia and detail, because in our world those are the rules. A 1 is an ace, you fold, you concede, but yeah,
It definitely feels as a self-contained scene, as you say. It's great. It is great. And Granny versus Death, it's obviously a pairing that you want to see. But I think the way the scene is written, the fact that Death has 4 ones in inverted commas, like that feels like the punchline. So like I do think the reveal is that he has a winning hand and he chooses not to play it. But I still just don't understand what purpose that serves in the story. Or so yeah, I'm sure, as you say, somebody out there who knows a thing or two about a thing or two will hopefully be able to let me know, because like as with the Swan, I love looking for things like that and sort of any little hints or clues as to maybe what is to come, or what kind of tonal territory we're going into, what kind of themes to expect. But because she's saving the life. Sorry, I was going to move on because I was like, but I can't now.
he doesn't let it go.
I can't. I find it really hard. So the purpose of the game, she's saving the life. The child lives, but then there's a cow or something, the cow dies. Is that what it is? Something like that. Yeah. So again, thinking about where the story's going and which characters are there and whose lives are potentially in danger, and what Granny's willing to do to save them. But
so it's both, the cow's sick as well.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like Granny. Well, I mean, is it a headology thing? But surely Granny can't do headology on death. You know, she can't trick death into throwing a game of, or maybe she can. Maybe it's as simple as that. You know, because death assumes that he's taken the losing hand. I don't know. I'm gonna have to move on. Somebody's gonna be like, I know the answer to this. Stop talking about it. Write it and tell me, and we'll definitely give you a shout out next time.
The answer might not be out there. Be prepared, because it ain't Cripple Mr. Onion.
No, well, this is it. Yeah, and it is. It's odd to see a real world game, card game that we understand the rules of, used in Discworld whenever, yeah, we're used to something like Cripple Mr. Onion, which again, I'm sure somebody has concocted rules to, but you know, I like games like that in fiction that can just be whatever they need to be, can just serve whatever purpose they need to serve in the course of a scene or a story.
I mentioned Bucket and Salzella there, and they've got quite an extended scene in this bit where they're talking about the previous owners of the opera house and the ghost and the flooded basement and all that. And I thought it was quite it was what's an info dump when it's not dumping stuff, when it's actually quite graceful and
the opposite of an exposition dump. Yeah, good question. What
an info architectural info
dump?
sustainable
A lift?
building.
If the dump is a verb, the opposite of the verb to dump would be what? To lift, to gather, to scoop, and an info scoop. I like that. It's got a ring to it. I'm gonna coin that. Yeah,
that's going in the episode description.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Because what's happening there, isn't it, is that they are setting up the world of Phantom of the Opera, essentially, for people like me who don't know what it is. So yeah, I agree. I find it very well written, and I could tell that because there's a bit of simmering conflict between those two characters, then that makes it all very palatable and very interesting. Especially if you don't really know what they expect and you need that world set up for you in the way that I did. Yes, I would agree. Info scoop. Copyright, PJ Hart, 2024. Loved it. That's teamwork. I think we can share. Copyright, I've never read Discworld, 2024.
So otherwise you'd be hearing from my Society of Authors Lawyers.
Indeed. Oh yes, that's right. We're in rival guilds. Yeah, my Writers Guild lawyers will defend me vigorously.
Another little steal from Elspace. I think it's worth it. They stay at a house of ill repute, the witches. And that was quite amusing that Granny knows the lady of the house.
The madam, yeah.
Actually,
which is Mrs. Pam. Yeah, and I was gonna again treading carefully here.
Back in Equal Rights on her visit to Ankh-Morpork. And I love Equal Rights.
Because again, treading carefully, spoilers. Yeah, Mrs. Pam is a recurring character. I was thinking back to, it was Equal Rights, Old Granny's first visit to Ankh-Morpork. And I was trying to remember if we'd seen her at all in between. I don't think she didn't crop up with the guards or anything like that yet. But anyway, yeah, it's like I was saying before, these worlds are now coming together and starting to mesh and starting to feel like one complete Discworld, as it were. And yeah, and having them stay with Mrs. Pam and having Nanny sort of be on the back foot for once in that kind of situation was quite nice as well. Really good callback. Enjoyed that a lot.
We'll also get another wee real life link from Elspace, which I quite appreciated. In that Walter Plinge was very obviously based on the Frank Spencer's character from Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, the beret, the sort of the nervousness, the submissiveness, and of course Frank Spencer is the character's name actually, played by Michael Crawford, who was the original lead in the Andrew Lloyd Webber 1980s Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, that's one I came across as well, and I wasn't that familiar. Like I knew the name of Some Mothers Do Have 'Em as just one of those like kind of old square UK TV sitcoms, but I know very little about it. Like, what is the premise?
Oh, you're 10 years too young.
Yeah.
I can't remember very much about it, apart from the catchphrase is of Frank Spencer has a girlfriend called Betty, and he says her name in a sort of a withering voice, "Oh, Betty," and
That's all
that's
you need
about
for a
my
sitcom is
yeah.
a good catchphrase, I guess. So cool. Okay.
Like that, yeah.
And then
And
he went on
it
to
was
be
massively popular at one point. Some mothers do have them.
awesome.
Um,
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah, I must go check it out. Yeah, because you could sort of got a feeling that there was, as you say, with the look and the mannerisms of Walter, there's something very specific
if
at
you
play
enjoyed
there.
Walter Plunge in Maskerade, go check out his other adventures in Some Mothers Do Have Them.
The alternate universe, the multiverse version. Cool. Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Um, yeah. So as I've been alluding to over the last probably like 5 or 6 episodes now, actually, I've been really slowly reading the Rob Wilkins Terry Pratchett biography, and between the last episode and this one, I got to a section where they're just talking about traveling like a lot, like book tours, like to Australia and all around the UK, America, everywhere. And it seems that like Terry wasn't like, even though he did it a lot and he felt like he had, I don't know if he felt like he had to do it, but like according to Rob anyway, he seemed to moan about it quite a lot. Like, and I was wondering if like all these sections, every time the witches go anywhere, we have to read the journey on the page. They never just like, oh, 2 weeks later they arrived at Ankh-Morpork. Like we spend 2 weeks with them on the road, or we spend however many months we spend with them on the road in Witches Abroad. And I wonder, is that like a cathartic thing for Terry to like ride out all his woes from being stuck on the road for so long at this
There's
period of his
I think this
career?
is the only episode I've managed to get through all the annotations before we've gone on air. There's
Okay.
a story about a fan wearing anorak earrings, anorak earrings, that makes it into this book, and her name appears in the book, and I think the line is something like "lovely earrings," such and such.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, I didn't want to read that into it. I guess out of hope, because we've got the story about Nanny Ogg's publisher.
Oh,
And I
yes,
was
of
kind of
course.
hoping Terry hadn't been, and I'm thinking probably he hadn't been screwed over by a publisher. I think if that had happened, I would have heard the stories.
The
But I
only
think
thing
it's
that's
probably,
mhm.
I can imagine it's based off somebody Terry was talking to and has heard that woe story from other authors.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose things like that would have been common enough when I'm sure you and I have both heard horror stories, I'm sure, of people who've been messed about by agents or broadcasters or publishers. Yeah, the only thing that I can think of specifically from the biography is that the publisher, the hardback publisher, maybe changed around this time
All
because
right.
whoever was originally doing the hardback publishing, I think, fell behind a few times.
I'm going to do due diligence on that book because this week's Private Eye carries a
Oh,
story that
yeah, we have a scoop. Well, private, I have a scoop that we're repeating.
the A Life with Footnotes was co-written by ghostwriter Giles Smith and not solely by Rob Wilkins, as stated on the cover.
Yeah, I mean, that really does feel like news, and to have that news broken while I'm like 2/3 of the way reading the book is kind of like mind blowing. But what's the source for that? Did they say? I mean, they wouldn't publish it if they didn't have a good source for it.
Now, Private Eye's pretty good about that sort of stuff,
Yeah,
aren't they? They don't have, they don't list a source.
yeah. I mean, as I say, I absolutely believe them. But yeah, because he's won awards for that and stuff,
Yeah,
and
I
then
won a
they,
Hugo for which
yeah,
Terry never won.
yeah,
The
they
article informs me.
allowed our good buddy Mark to publish his book as well. I mean, why did they just not get Mark Burrows to ghostwrite it if they needed a ghostwriter? He seemed more than capable.
Just by his comp, I hope it's resolved, but by the time this episode goes there, but Mark's Dublin spot has been cancelled by the organisers, which is really bad form, and he's looking
Oh,
around for a new venue for that. So I hope that transpires.
do you happen to know what date that is supposed to be happening on, or when he's
Um,
supposed to be in town? Or
I don't. This is, as we record, this is 12th of August, and the news just, I think it's about 5 days old, but he just announced the location
So,
a day or two
well,
ago.
if you're Dublin based and you want to see Mark and you know somewhere where he could do his thing, then hit him up. Because, yeah, well worth seeing. Very, very knowledgeable guy. Very, very interesting show. So, yeah, that's a shame if audiences in Dublin miss
If
out on
you
that.
know somebody who has a venue that's interested, 300 to 400 people, Mark will sell that out, no problem. Edinburgh Fringe, Top Stars, a stack of other locations.
Indeed, indeed. Yes, well, all the best
Including
for
the
that, Mark.
Belfast show that we ran was pretty well booked out, I think.
It was sold out. Yeah, that was a sold out show in the Black Box in Belfast. That's right.
If you can sell out Belfast, you can sell out anywhere.
Yeah, we're apathetic. We're an apathetic bunch. Uh,
Have we?
back to the book. Eh? What about
Yes.
the book? Sorry, Mark, but you know we've got a job to do here.
Exclamation
Yes,
mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark.
indeed. Yeah, so this is where I put my hands up. I think I got a reference in this opera book. This is the Singing in the Rain plotline. Sort of begins around here with Agnes having to sing behind Christine, and then I guess the kind of overlap with the Phantom of the Opera story is that Agnes then is the one who gets the tuition from the ghost as a result of that, because of the whole kind of mix up with identities and what do they switch bedrooms? Is that what it is? That's something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was gonna go a bit further maybe, and but to be honest, I'm sort of glad it didn't. You know, the whole kind of mistaken identities, who's in love with who, kind of, you know, back to Midsummer Night's Dream, lords and ladies kind of stuff. I'm kind of glad that it didn't. I'm glad that it was more of a vehicle for the murder mystery stuff, which I find, you know, I think Terry writes that stuff a bit better anyway. Because we get our first couple of deaths, our first couple of murders proper in this section as well, don't we?
Yeah. Now that's something I actually should have said in my opinion at the overview, that this is a really solid murder mystery and spy thriller. There's the secrets in this, I feel Terry keeps really, the cards are close to his chest, like, and I'm kept guessing, trying to work out who is the ghost.
It is. It's certainly well constructed. I think I've mentioned this before in that some of these rereads for me, they lose a little something because a lot of the books I only really half remember, but like the things I'm sure to remember are all the juiciest spoilers, do you know? So like on this read, it feels inevitable, probably from around this section, that Walter is the ghost. So then the question for me at this stage sort of became, is the ghost doing the murders? Because I'm fairly sure Walter's the ghost, and that I don't think it's based on any like missteps that Terry's made. It's based on my kind of, you know, half rememberings of reading it 25 years ago or whatever. And so yeah, it's a shame, I think, because like some of that intricate plotting I've sort of spoiled for myself, unfortunately. Getting the stakes nice and high at this stage, you know, they barely started investigating Pounder's death before Dr. Undershaft is killed. And if I'm remembering correctly, Undershaft is killed either right before or during a show, or they find the body during a show, maybe.
I think they find the body. Yeah, he's killed during a show or yeah, off stage.
Yeah, so the stakes are up for the Opera House and ostensibly for Bucket and Salzella, because we haven't had the reveal yet. Like the stakes for everybody then seem so much higher. So yeah, I agree that yeah, this section in particular I think is really well constructed in terms of the whole murder mystery plot.
I don't know if I ever actually suspected Walter, maybe until the last, when I knew there were two ghosts. And I thought, right, okay, Walter's gonna be one. I guess the red herring that I was going after was the literal ghost. And the only thing I'd seen that made me think there was an actual apparition, a
Mm.
non-transparent, and some magic about was the black roses uh,
Oh yeah.
that pop up around about this part. And actually, I left the book not really feeling that part had been explained. I think the
I,
closest I get is that they're glow in the dark. So sort of
yeah,
dark paint.
I just assumed that was a reference to something that I didn't know. I assumed that was a reference to Phantom or something. The roses, but there's something quite eerie and yeah, tonally it feels kind of in the right wheelhouse. I don't know, maybe it is a specific reference to something, but yeah, it never occurred to me. I don't know why. I guess it's because people are being murdered, right? Because people are being murdered, I automatically assume that the ghost is a person because that's what happens in Scooby-Doo, right? So it has to, yeah, so it has to be a person because like the whole thing is basically a Scooby-Doo episode where the old man Salzella is gonna try and flip the opera house or whatever, you
Yeah.
know.
I used to think when people used that phrase, it was like to demean something or, to compare it to Scooby-Doo. But once you stick on the glasses and you look at the world by referencing how, how it parallels with Scooby-Doo, it's actually some serious um sociological, philosophical perspective theory shit.
Yeah, man,
So
Scooby-Doo is
much
based like
Scooby-Doo in this earth.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that was a good life lesson to teach the kids, that like if something is amiss, that there's usually some creepy old capitalist behind it trying to make a buck, you
And
know.
here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's certainly the case in this book ultimately as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess I should have. As I say, I'm sure that like the younger reader that I was when I first read this, I'm sure I was putty in Terry's hands with all this intricate plotting, and only my kind of vague memories of it probably dampened it a little bit for me this time. And I really do wish some of these books I could read fresh first time as an adult. This definitely would have been one of them.
If we can we start to segue, and I'll tell my experience with this part of the book.
Oh
Um,
yes, please do.
so this is where I sort of I took a step back and I decided, well, look, I'm gonna go and check out some more opera. Um, so I went and I got a copy of Phantom of the Opera, the 20th anniversary of the Andrew Lloyd Webber version. Um, and that was quite awesome. I actually took a day off and I watched 6 hours of opera. I almost never take a day off. My life is work every single day, and so 6 hours watching opera is completely unusual. 3 hours
Can,
watching opera is unusual, but
can I
um,
just point out though that still counts as work because they were doing it for the podcast. So
tentatively, yeah. Patreon.com/Andy Luke. Um, so yeah, it was.
I like that experience has just left you speechless. I spent the whole working day watching opera, and it broke my brain. Or I
Yeah.
mean, I would expect. I know if I tried to watch a whole day's worth of opera, I would definitely come out of it none the wiser.
Yeah, I so that put me in the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, which is actually brilliant. It's really good. Now, piece of opera, your average is about 3 hours long. In that, and we mentioned the lead character's name is Christine. In that, the Phantom is her father. So I was expecting her father to appear throughout the book. I was watching Andree very closely because Andree is the nearest that we get to a male lead, to a love interest. So he plays
Yeah,
a much that and character plays a much bigger role in Maskerade. Um, I really enjoyed Andrew Lloyd Webber version. I followed that with 3 hours watching a German version subtitled of Das Rheingold, the first of the Ring Cycle.
and was that like a modern version or was that some classic stuff?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, that was sometime in the last 20 years. I couldn't really, it's in German, so I'm not really sort of enjoying it the same way. But it's started to remind me of like reading Das Rheingold, and like it's quite a simple story. It's about like Odin promises two thugs, his daughter, and he had eggs on the deal. And so the two thugs say they'll have this really powerful ring. And so Odin's kind of backed into a corner, so he has to go and get this ring off a dwarf that stole this ring, and the ring is all apart. Anyway, Phantom of the Opera, yes, is this phantom terrorizing the opera and the leading woman and freaking people out. And he's got the mask, and I'm sure you've heard the songs from it. The Phantom of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
Opera
yeah.
is here
I mean, not as well
inside
sung as
my
that, certainly,
mind.
but
So I am going around the house singing this aloud.
of course,
Um,
gotta get into it.
and I'm in with the gerbils now. I mentioned in the last podcast we lost one of our gerbils, my dear friend Troy.
Yeah.
And with gerbils you have to get a new gerbil in quite frequently. We got this adorable little baby, Slippery, about 3 or 4
Oh,
months old,
cute name.
gorgeous. So I'm going in there and I'm singing, and I hear this squeaking, and I think this is Slippery singing to me, and I'm, hello Slippery, how are you? Do you like my operatic moves? And I
Just
keep
off the dome, amazing.
and Slippery squeaking back, and so I'm having this whole conversation with the gerbils. Hello, Abed, how are you? Do you like my operatic moves? I'm going now to get you some seed. The lift is to you, my friend. And this is, so I'm doing this quite a lot. So I'm going back and forward, doing a bit of housework, but singing to the gerbils.
As you do.
And assuming that there's more squeaking than usual, they're singing back. And it's about 2:30 in the morning when they're still squeaking. Only because Abed's too old to squeak.
Okay.
He's Slippery, but there's an awful lot of squeaking going on. And I find out that there's pups in the tank.
Oh my goodness.
4 little new babies. And this is an extra surprise because I thought Slippery was a boy.
Uh-huh. Well,
Um,
yeah, it would be the
and then there's a whole other story. As I'm reading this, the next morning, Slippery does something very unusual. I've never read about gerbils doing. Takes the pups out of the tank. It rests on a big futon, and she
right.
has them all nesting in the fold. So there's a big operation to lift this very heavy tank to undo this very complex futon. And I only got to see the pups about 3 days ago, and there's 7 of them.
Whoa.
And they're like jelly babies. They're like not the Bassett's jelly babies, the Haribo jelly babies, even smaller ones.
Wow.
Absolutely adorable. But anyway, all because of Maskerade. I was singing. I thought the gerbils were singing back, appreciating my song, but actually the singing came back because there was 7 new gerbils.
Yeah, a whole choir of gerbils singing back. That's what I'm taking away from that. Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations on your gerbil babies. And what's happening with them? Are they going to new gerbil families or
They are going to stay with me. So with new gerbils, 2 months you recommended to keep them for at
oh, very good.
least. I'm going to go for
Okay.
3 months as advised. And then I'm going to have to start shifting them off in couples. So
Gotcha.
if you know anybody who would like a few gerbils,
Oh, yeah.
drop me
I
in.
mean, if there are any listeners in the greater North Down, East Belfast area, I'm sure it might take them off your hands.
Yeah, drop us a DM.
If you trust our listeners. I mean, why wouldn't we? We love our listeners. And on that note, wow, yeah, that took a turn. I didn't know where that was going. That really took a turn.
I think one of the gerbils is going to be called Futon.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously, of course. I
But
feel
you
like
can
you
name
need
the others after Discworld characters.
yeah, you got it. I mean, specifically Masquerade characters.
There's a couple of females in there, so you could have give a few witches.
Yeah, Esme, Perdita. Do you know, I don't know why that's the opposite of what we're talking about, but it occurs to me that we haven't talked a huge amount about the whole Henry Slug, Enrico Basilia subterfuge.
Yeah, another 2 names characters.
Your favorite, yeah. But like, is this a thing? Is this like a known thing? Is he riffing on something specific here with your knowledge of opera and opera singers and stuff, or is this a Terry Pratchett original idea that like fancy opera singers are all probably just fat blokes from the East End?
I don't know. The only thing that occurred to me as a possible answer is probably not really an answer. It's that notion of where you get. I mean, that it's really a post Pavarotti thing of where opera singers are, and that's what we're thinking of in terms of Pavarotti. So you have like he's active all through the 70s and 80s, working really hard, doing a lot of stuff. And then you get the 90s where he's like a superstar and he's, was it Nest Normal was a number one? No, I don't think it was a number one hit, was it? But it was like
Uh,
in pop charts.
Could be. I mean, it could have
So
been. I don't know.
you get this a lot with um opera singers in the 2000s as well, and to some extent the 2010s. You've got the opera singers that work away at the hard graft and the classical things, and then there's the stardom of the rock star opera singer. But I guess
Satellites.
you can apply that to any entertainment performer, really.
Yeah, yeah. I just wondered if, yeah, if there was any like, if it was a specific reference to somebody who pretended to be Italian or whatever. But I mean, it's a funny enough idea that I believe that Terry made it up because it is funny. It's and the character, and he just wants to eat normal food, and they're all trying to make him this horrendous, like burnt pasta and stuff. Yeah, it does feel quite
Slug
Terry
is a
Pratchett.
dreadful name for somebody who likes their food.
Yeah, it's beyond Dickensian for sure. The only, just when you were saying about the sellout opera singers, the timeline doesn't line up, but I could only help thinking about the Go Compare opera singer
Yeah.
who is Welsh, I believe. But then they've got good kind of pedigree when it comes to singing as well, I guess, in Wales.
And the
But there you
slug
go.
slug perdita grouping is apt. Like it's a what you call a reinvention. They're both reinventing themselves.
Yeah,
Um,
they each have their stage persona, and the fact that even though Slug has a successful stage persona, which is arguably everything that Agnes could ever want, he's still not happy. He's still happier when he's being himself. So I think there's very clear parallels to be drawn between those two characters, uh, and it's great that every moment with Slug slash Basilia is hilarious as well. So you're not just feeling
he
this.
he retires at the end of the story, doesn't he?
Yeah, he hooks back up with his long lost love, which feels very operatic, to be fair. Um, and then yeah, or no, he says if he's gonna keep singing, but he's gonna sing, he's gonna be himself. So he's gonna drop the persona, but I don't think he's gonna retire.
Right.
Somebody can correct me on
Right.
that if
So
I'm wrong.
that's interesting because what you get is a reinvention on top of a reinvention, which is what
Exactly.
Agnes has done. She's reinvented herself from a witch to an opera singer, and then at the end of the book, she reinvents herself as a witch.
Yeah, their character arcs are mirrored for sure.
And it gives for that, like what I was talking about before. It's not just a simple fit of Agnes for Margaret. There's a whole journey she's got to go through first.
Yeah, and I think like we talked last time as to whether the series was how it would continue, and I don't think it would have been worth continuing if it was just a matter of dropping another witch into Magrat's shoes without giving them their own kind of journey, and I think Agnes has got really credible, really engaging character arc in this book for sure. Uh, do you want to do part three on that note?
The show goes on, attended by Granny, Nanny's scarf, and a figure behind the curtains. A crowd gathers around Dr. Undershaft, though he was a terribly rude man. In the shades, thieves require bandages. Christina and Perdita receive some unusual roses. And in a letter, the ghost has more directions for the opera. Granny offers Mr. Goatburger some predictions, and Nanny Og enjoys a fortune as far as the dress shop and the hairdressers. Perdita explores secret passages.
some good funny games here in this section. I've slightly retract my statement from the notes. So I didn't write much about this section in the notes, but I did write that it dragged a little bit for me, maybe. But I'm sort of reminded of their Granny's adventures in the shades and spending all Nanny's money, which both sections I actually really enjoyed. I had maybe theorized that I'd perhaps missed out on some particularly juicy footnotes. Maybe that's why the section wasn't maybe throwing fireworks, but apparently that's not the case.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of really fun stuff. The spending of Nanny's money, particularly, we haven't even talked about the whole joy of snacks thing. That yes, Nanny's written a rather saucy cookery book. Let's do another filler with the L space, and the joy of sex was actually based off a cookery book to begin with, so it's consciously or not, it's gone full circle a bit.
I mean, that has to be a conscious decision there, but it's also just a perfect world of puns. Then it's the most Terry Pratchett device imaginable, really, isn't it? We're just like,
for listeners under 40, the Joy of Sex was a hardback graphic manual for lovers, which was massively big in the 1970s and 1980s. Yes, every self-respecting middle-class couple had one.
I like the way the fact that you say it's hardback is suspiciously
Not
specific.
hardback.
No, it's respectable piece of non-fiction literature, I assume. Yeah, I wish I should have made a list of some of the best recipes from the Joy of Snacks. I mean, I'm aware that there is a real life Nanny Ogg's cookbook out there, which I assume contains them. Maybe we should have a go at that someday.
Maybe you could do a bit of a Discworld chef kind of episode at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm barely managing to keep on top of the research for the book episodes, never mind cooking episodes. But I do quite like cooking. I do get myself into a bit of trouble in the kitchen sometimes, so I certainly wouldn't say no if there's any particularly good ones. If there's any requests, put it that way. If anybody wants to request a Nanny Ogg recipe, I commit here and now to at least attempting it.
I sense a filling episode coming.
Yeah.
See what I did there.
Well, yes, I was going to say whether it's gastronomically filling or not will be a matter for for my skills.
The shade scene where Granny and Mrs. Plinger jumped on was quite a nice sort of surprise, because you expect the thieves to come off worse because they're screwing with Granny Weatherwax. That's going to be the regret, but then it's suggested fairly strongly that this is a ghost that saves their bacon.
Yeah, and one would have to assume it's the Walter version of the ghost that does that for obvious reasons. So yeah, I think this is the strongest hint actually by far that the ghost is Walter, up until this point. And yeah, again, I'm aware that I'm criticizing something that I had spoiled for me 25 years ago, so that none of these criticisms are necessarily fair. But I do sort of feel that there aren't a lot of there aren't enough potential red herrings for suspects in this, because I think by this point you're like, the ghost is Walter. But I think it starts to become pretty clear because Walter doesn't kill the thieves. Do you know what I mean? Like the ghost protects Walter's mom, implying that Walter is the ghost, but the thieves aren't murdered, right? So this is the first where the wheels start to turn, that if Walter is the ghost isn't doing the murders, or somebody else is. And if it's not Salzella, who is it? I guess Andree. Would that be your answer?
Yeah, I was looking in the direction of Andree, saying I couldn't find a father for Christine about. Andree was possible. Slightly skipping ahead to the next part. My other suspect, more likely than Andree, was Mrs. Plinge.
Oh, okay, like a psycho kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah. When she attacks Nanny Og, yeah,
Yeah, though
that
that,
was,
yeah,
and that,
okay.
even though that's kind of waved away, um,
Yeah, because I was committed to Walter at that
I
point, so it's
stuck with
like,
that theory for quite a while. Yeah.
yeah, that would have been no, sorry, that's actually totally fair. That is totally fair. And again, it's just the baggage of this the kind of decades of spoilers that I think probably had me overlook that. But yeah, it's good to get that perspective from a fresh read that actually, yes, Walter's mom is a very credible red herring in this section. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Andy did up his tie there, as I said that. Like he was all chuffed. He was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Detective Andy's on the case."
Um, I can't remember at what point I settled on Walter Plinge being a ghost. Maybe when it was certain that there were two ghosts.
Yeah,
Um, but because he's so different in physical performance than the ghost, that's kind of certainly what would have led me away from him.
yeah,
Also, the whole thing about the angry mob chasing him with torches. Um, Although I understand that is a major scene in the 1920s Phantom of the Opera films,
oh
it's
yeah,
not in as far as I recall, the Andrew Lloyd Webber one, or it's done
interesting.
very differently
Okay,
in the Andrew Lloyd Webber one. But I just put that down to the trope of the mob with flaming torches chasing the village idiot because they assume the village idiot is the source of all evil.
yeah, and Terry loves a kind of stereotypical mob. You know, loves his torches and pitchforks and stuff. And it's a good scene. Although, as you say, we probably are jumping ahead slightly, but we might as well read the synopsis so we can keep talking about it. Part four. Part four. Over indigenous cootie dumplings, Lady Esmeralda purchases box 8, although the chocolate delight does not go down well. Perdita explores the cellars, the ballet school, meets the new organist, and learns Walter is not the ghost. Mrs. Plinge shares a bottle with Nanny Og. The aristocracy arrive: Count de Nobs, Count Detritus, and Lord Greebo. Ghost is chased up the chandelier, onto the rooftops, and through the city streets. But maybe there's more than one ghost. Perfectly normal things.
In
Sorry, go
Phantom of the
ahead.
Opera, the chandelier is a massive. It's the big piece of chandelier falls, and it's a big crash. And we get, I think, in the next section, we get that the rope is quite frayed, and that looks like it's going to be happening. Um, and of course, in the Andrew Lloyd Webber version, that comes down as well from the ceiling. But in the version that's on film, the 20th anniversary, which is the only one like available to watch on video, it doesn't happen because they had the theatre that they were using wasn't adequate to drop the chandelier.
Oh,
So
wow, that's a
it's
shame.
rigged with lighting that looks like fireworks. It goes off way too often.
Interesting. Okay.
And
Yeah.
another thing I want to say about that, actually, like we've all heard the Phantom of the Opera main theme, um, but it's so weird it's so weird in context from being performed as a single piece. It's so you really get the meaning of it in the context of the opera itself, whereas in the sort of the single, it feels just hearing it alone, like an isolated kind of pop thing, like the Phantom is to be celebrated. He's actually
Uh-huh.
quite a frightening freak. So
Yeah, okay.
little aside, yeah, back to Maskerade.
You should listen to the Iron Maiden song then. Because that feels like it's the opposite. They feel like counterpoints to each other. But yes, in terms of what's actually happening in the book, uh, Nobby and Detritus are here, which is fun.
Some great naming. I was glad to hear you pronounced Lord Greebo correctly.
Do we think? I don't know. I'll take a punt on it. I think that's good. We'll stick with that. Okay. Yeah, I sort of feel that that's basically Detritus. His whole reason for being in this book instead of colon is so that you can have Count Detritus.
Yeah. And actually, that's another segue into talking about the Andrew Lloyd Webber version.
Oh,
Is that when the cops come in and that to check out the opera to search for the Phantom to shoot him on sight,
right.
or to apprehend, yeah, or earlier than not to apprehend him, they're really visible. They're like right at quite near the foot of the stairs in the mise en scene, and they're very visible. So whether that's, I mean, that's, it seems like what Terry's doing, if he'd seen the Weber version, is an obvious satire on that.
Yeah, I mean, all the all this the music or the songs that Walter has written are all stand-ups of Andrew Lloyd Webber shows. So like there's no doubt in my mind that he's specifically referencing Andrew Lloyd Webber's version for sure. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, having not seen it myself, but
Even in the libretto, the cops are quite prominently placed. They're given some really their lines appear at key parts.
so yeah, who better than like the two least competent cops in Ankh-Morpork, with the possible exception of Colon, who gets the day off. I do think that's quite interesting. Just from that kind of big picture Discworld thing, usually it is Nobby and Colon who pop up as kind of a double act whenever they show up in other characters' books, and it's interesting to see Nobby and Detritus getting a run out instead. And I do feel that it might come down just to the whole being able to have a Count Detritus gag, but I also think that like
But
the way the watch is used in this book, hopefully the readers have read the watch novels as well, and if they have, it makes us feel very much part of that world. But even if they haven't, the tropes are recognizable. You say these characters are, there's obvious parallels to these characters in the play slash novel, so you're still at home. You still know what's going on, even if you haven't read Guards or you haven't read Men at Arms. So yeah, I think it works really well.
it works for that noticeability because Detritus is a troll.
Yeah,
Knobs is just a mouthpiece, um, and not opera class. Let's be clear on that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
get
yeah.
that much.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that, because you've got obviously grannies pretending to be a wealthy lady patron of the opera when she's not. The Nobby and Detritus are pretending to be um, something that they're not as well. I mean, Greebo is pretending to be a completely different species. So yeah, all this idea of taking on different identities and stuff like that is all very much on theme with Agnes and all that stuff.
This is a third time Greebo has become a human, so I'm getting to think this is a regular feature.
Yeah, and you can tell he just has a blast writing him. Like he's obviously based on a real cat, obviously, I don't know, one of Terry's cats or something like that. And yeah, now over the course of this podcast, when we started this, I didn't have a cat, and now I do, and have had now for quite some time. And now I really look forward to Greebo coming back, because like I've got a lot more familiarity with cats and their personalities, and seeing it sort of transplanted onto a human just gets laughs every time.
It was a really good choice to make him Mistress Weatherwax's Esmeralda Weather Lady Esmeralda Wax's Weatherwax's date. I almost
Yeah,
like that because I
nailed it.
think Granny and Human Grebo have such a great coupling. The whole sort of yes, Granny sort of
Yeah, yeah.
obedience that she instills in him is kind of fun.
Yeah, the way he speaks,
Uh,
I mean, I bring it up quite often with Granny and the borrowing and stuff. There's some like creepy kind of body horror that kind of creeps into the witch's story sometimes. And yeah, the fact that Grebo still talks like a cat, even though he's a person, verges into that territory for me sometimes. It's yeah, but in like a good way, like it's intentional. Yeah, it really works. Love seeing Grebo in his human form. And then is it around? No, it's not here, but it's coming. Yeah, so when the watch get involved, that this time around that was something I hadn't remembered. So the whole kind of red herring with Nobby and Detritus was good. That did work on me this time in terms of revealing that Andree was a undercover cop. That worked quite well. And again, just in terms of fully fleshed out 3D Discworld. Like that feels like a very Sam Vimes thing to do, you know, in terms of sending in two obvious cops so that the real undercover cop can go about their business unhindered. Like that's you can see that being a plot point in a Vimes book, you know. So like Discworld, the fact that there's like an obvious City Watch storyline going on behind the scenes of this book makes everything feel so interconnected and complete. So yeah, I love that.
This is why I come to this podcast. That was quite some insight, PJ. Yeah, I quite liked that reveal as well, Andree.
And shall we rock it on to the finale then?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Go for it. It's your turn.
Discovery in the cellar reveals Walter breathes opera and there are sacks of gold. Granny and Agnes learn Andree is undercover watch. Nanny disturbs Salzella, who hides on stage. When Perdita is held hostage, Walter Plins takes on the great villain. Granny and Nanny return to Ljerka, and sometime later we're joined by Perdita/Agnes. We both got a bit of exercise today on actually sort of knowing what we wanted to say.
Yeah.
This
So
I got
go
I
for
got
it. Go for it.
the reference "Don't Cry for Me, Janua."
Yeah.
For a while in this period in the late 80s, early 90s, the song "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" was a massive one. And that's another Andrew Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice. It's actually 1976. But I think if we'd been reading Discworld in my house, it would have been "Don't Cry for Me, Janua." Madonna, this is our Madonna link. She
Yes.
title role in the film adaptation of this musical and recorded her rendition a year after Maskerade is published. So
That was going to be my question because
I
I definitely remember it being a 90s thing, but it came out after. So Masquerade first and then Madonna's.
Madonna
What's
stole
it? Evita? That
Masquerade.
came
Yeah.
after. Oh,
But,
wow.
but
Yeah.
4 years before Masquerade, Sinead O'Connor did her recording, the esteemed Sinead O'Connor.
Of course. Yeah. Wow.
And just because they were handy, I copied out. I really appreciated. There's a list of Ankh-Morpork musicals and operas, and all occur towards in this end section of the book across a handful of pages. And I really admire Terry's restraint in playing off all these puns. So just the Barber of Pseudopolis, the Enchanted Piccolo, Guys and Trolls, Hogwarts Side Story, Miserable Les, and Seven Dwarfs for Seven Other Dwarfs.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite?
Um, oh, I'm Miserable Les.
Okay, yeah, it's in my top three for sure. But if you're picking that, I'm stuck between Guys and Trolls and Seven Dwarfs for Seven Other Dwarfs.
That is good. My others would have been Barber of Pseudopolis and Hogwarts Side Story. So
They're all good. Yeah, they're all good. I like Seven Dwarfs because you think it's gonna be like a Snow White thing, but then it's the Seven Brothers or Seven Wives thing. Yeah, you got puns that have layers. That's what I like. Yeah, so you can tell that like by this point, if it wasn't clear already, which it definitely was, that this is a real love letter to yeah, this kind of era, I guess, of musical theater. Which, as I say, is something that I'm only really kind of getting a bit of knowledge of it a bit more so now. Definitely would have been all this would have been maybe with the exception of Guys and Dolls would have been over my head for sure the first time I read it.
I want to say something that's really occurring to me now. It should have been in the notes if I was going to make any.
It's off the dome.
I did do, but didn't. And that's architecture's environment, because all through this book we get characters traveling all around the opera house, most noticeably Perdita, but also Granny and Nanny, going into all the hallways, all the corridors. I was at a gig once. It was a lecture, but it was in a musical gig type environment. It was a concert hall, and it was a massive one, and I got bored because it was a massive, like 9 hour lecture. And I went off and I started wandering around all the corridors and finding like dressing rooms and all these other places. And it was like a real labyrinth, a real maze, and you get that in Maskerade with not, there's a secret reveals on top of that, the hidden
Mm.
passageways, um, and it kind of it's happening all through Perdita's time at the opera, and it comes to a head here when she finds Walter's basement with its manuscripts and sacks of gold and all that. And
Yes,
it feels really lived in, I think.
it does. Something I didn't clock even on my second read there, but that I did once I glanced over your wonderful synopses, was that Salzella tells Bucket right at the start that the basements are flooded.
That's what I knew, that was about something I couldn't figure it out right. So he
Yeah.
slipped in a red herring
Well, I
with
think it's
water.
yeah. Well, what it is, I think, is it's Salzella's telling him that so that he'll never go there because that's where all the stolen money is.
Yeah.
So that's like, so he's telling on himself right there, right at the start of the book, which is that's how you do it. Like that's how you write a murder mystery. You have a clue right at the start that isn't obvious until it's revealed at the end. Like that is nailed on thriller writing right there. So yeah, I think that worked great. I think Salzella actually, again, is for all my belly aching about it, like he is the perfect villain for this because he's there, he's a constant presence, he's antagonistic to a degree, but never really directly in the spotlight until this moment in terms of suspects. And the whole musical director of an opera house who hates opera feels like a very Terry Pratchett character. And I I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about the stage death? Because I think
Oh,
that maybe takes it a little bit too far where like he's not stabbed for real. Like it's a stage. Like
it's
the sword goes under his armpit, but he still dies.
it's a psychosomatic stabbing.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
what's
Which I
going
feel
on?
like, yes, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, and I feel like that's maybe taking it a little bit too far because we don't have the big magical influences in this book. We don't have the creatures from the dungeon dimensions affecting reality in the way that they were in, say, moving pictures. So the fact that it's literally just the power of his will
I,
that
I
caused.
I think I could see it, but I think it just needed a lot, maybe not a lot more execution, but more execution, more work on it in the drafting to make it a convincing sell. But
Yeah.
you've raised a really interesting point in how this doesn't employ magic. There's a realism in this book, all the way through, odd because the lead characters are magicians, witches. So
Mm.
yeah, that's another element of this book I really appreciated.
Yeah, well, that Terry has always drawn that distinction, I suppose, between the magic of wizards and then the magic of witches, which is a lot more grounded in real life or headology or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, and I think because there are obvious parallels to soul music and moving pictures in terms of the overall framing device, that I think it's good, yeah, that there is no trans-dimensional doodads or big magic spells trying to escape or whatever. It's all just about, yeah, Scooby-Doo villain. And I mean that in a good way, like when I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. That there's a real tangible person with an agenda like that I think is all to the good.
Um,
And yeah, I had one of my typical sort of slightly wanky wandering points about that, which I think I've been trying to articulate this ever since moving pictures, and I tried again during soul music, and I still haven't quite put my finger on it. But those characters in those books, including this one, who embody the medium that the book is about, so whether it's cinema or rock music, or in this case, it's musical theater. Walter embodies musical theater, obviously in the way that Imp embodies rock music, Victor embodies cinema. Uh, and it interests me because it never really get any kind of explanation as to what makes cinema or rock music or musical theater like particularly important or special, but I think I'm starting to realize maybe that we don't actually need one, because like we just know like somewhere innately like inside us that these things are important, that they are special, and you know the reasons are intangible. So when we have these characters act on that, it makes it really cathartic, because it's something that we find difficult to put into words, like why we as a species are attracted to stories in all these different really specific ways. I know that's a bit like writers writing about writing, but like for me that's like a unique selling point for Discworld, is that it looks at that, it looks at the power of story all the time and what stories mean for people. And the fact I like I said, I do think it is a little bit too far, that it's essentially the power of story that kills Salzella, or allows Salzella to think that he's died. But everything right up until that point, especially, you know, when you start to see it through Walter's eyes and what it means to him, like I find all that stuff quite moving, and it's one of those things that continuously brings me back to these books.
While Moving Pictures is still my favorite novel, I suppose it doesn't actually need that hocus pocus of cinema when the magic is actually right there, and it's right there in opera in this book in terms of what Walter Plynge lives and breathes on.
Mm.
So it's fairly satisfying in that level. I couldn't help but think briefly of the Mark Thomas performance, Bravo Figaro. And the story there is um, his father was a very working class bricklayer. I- Sorry, not very working class, although he was, but a very sort of very bricklayer,
Gotcha.
very sort of old male, yelling and screaming, but also appears to be quite a lovely figure. And he very unusually adored opera. So in his failing years, when he was suffering from dementia, Mark organized an opera in the living room for
Mm-hmm.
his father to enjoy. And it's a, if you can get hold of Mark Thomas's Bravo Figaro, yeah, please do. Um, but yeah, this occurred to me as a working class affinity with something high culture
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
Walter has here. Um, that sort of like I got thinking about my own relationship with opera and how it kind of elevates, how it makes me not just some uh, wanker with pretensions, but some sort of self-identifying high culture. I've earned the right to wear a suit and tie kind of fella, and I look good in my tie, don't I? Genuine, you know. So
Yeah, I mean there
yeah,
is something there is something magical about going to the theater for sure. And like I think in a weird way, Terry maybe by doing moving pictures first and making it about cinema, had sort of almost skipped over the medium of theater by going straight to that. But obviously, theater could exist in Discworld in a way that cinema couldn't. So I think he's right to revisit that, and to like, and the you know he did theater, then he did music, and now he's done musical theater. So these things obviously really interest him, and he comes back to them again and again.
let me
For
tell you,
me,
opera's like Guinness. You know, it tastes horrible in your first gulp, but the more you drink, the better it goes down.
I don't know if it counts as an opera. It's certainly musical theater. The only one that I ever got like super into, it's called Hadestown. Have you heard of that?
Um,
No. So it started off as a an off Broadway musical about um, Eurydice and the
Morpheus.
Orpheus and Eurydice. Yeah, and it's by this singer songwriter that I quite like, called Anais Mitchell. And so she had this concept album about Orpheus and Eurydice, and it got turned into an off Broadway musical. And we happened to be there in the audience, my wife and I, for the original cast recording. and S. Mitchell was sitting like on the row opposite us. We got to meet her and stuff. That was really cool. And then it made it onto Broadway after that, and it's still playing on Broadway today. But if you get the original cast recording, not the Broadway cast recording, you can hear us clapping and cheering on the recording, which is cool. And even that, I mean, that, like, I'm telling you that story, you've never even heard of this play, you don't care, but like that's magical to me, so I feel compelled to tell you that story, and that is the power.
The opera has all this dress up. It has all the components of the musical. So you get a movie or a theater like experience. You get the dress up. You get the musical thing. Oh, I'm floundering a bit now. There's so many elements to it.
Yeah, well, I
It's
mean
kind
that
of
the
the
theatricalness
spirit.
on both sides, the fact that there's a certain theatricality to attending the opera as an audience member, like you say, you get dressed up, and
Yeah,
there's certain conventions that you
and
have to follow.
the
That's all part of the
venues,
magic.
you're gonna have beautiful sculptures all around the room, pillars, you don't get that in an IMAX.
No, and we should shout out. I mean, Belfast has a very fine opera house. For those that don't know, I don't think I've ever seen an actual opera in it. I mean, I know that I've never seen an actual opera in it. Have you?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
a couple.
I'm more in the pantomime audience myself. But yeah, if you're ever in town, as apparently we seem to get a lot more tourists every year, which is great to see. So if you're ever in town, you're not from Belfast, go check out Belfast Opera House.
Well, we're very fortunate that I was asked to do an art workshop in the Baby Grand, which is a small room above the Opera House,
Yeah,
and being asked to do something in there was like kind of overwhelming. It's a big honor, but even just going in for a show and like being part of that sort of dress up and the big night kind of thing, it's for what, 20 quid, it's an event. It feels like a major event. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, so I mean, a few things there we probably didn't touch on, like the librarian was in playing
Oh
the organ
yes.
again, which was a nice reference to soul music. And just generally, like every book at this stage just feels like it's going from strength to strength in terms of the world building.
There's
Um,
one point I'm not too sure on. I kind of am afraid to ask.
oh dear.
Um, but as they leave Ankh-Morpork, they can't find Greebo. Um, and the coach does stop to let on some kind of misshapen life that's never revealed who it is. And I'm kind of wondering, is that Greebo or is
That My reading is that they pick him up at the end after he's thoroughly spent himself doing whatever unspeakable things Greebo is likely to do when unsupervised in Ankh-Morpork.
there's a line that he's capable of sexual harassment just by being in the next room. Okay. Do we want to? Yeah, I really enjoyed that. This would be one that I'd quite like to see made into an opera or a musical or get just a live treatment.
I believe it has been adapted. I think Stephen Briggs has done a number on this one, has done one of his adaptations, or maybe not.
Stephen Briggs has actually adapted 18 Discworld novels, if I'm correct.
So, I
Um,
mean, he must have done this one then.
and there must be some sort of aggregator for Discworld shows. If there's
Yeah,
a Discworld adaptation, theatrical performance going on, there must be some site that carries that in the calendar because I really want to see one before this podcast's over. Um,
because
I'll
yeah,
take
so
I'll
if
take five though. So let us know.
yeah, it's out there apparently. Yeah, so if you're doing one, yeah, we'll be there as long as it's well. If it's on the island of Ireland, certainly we'll give it a fair lash, I would say.
Maybe we can sometime look at if we want to revisit something, we can look at one of the Briggs adaptation scripts.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'll really have to try to disengage the script editor part of my brain if we do that and just try and enjoy the ride. Do you want to
I'm
do
gonna
a
do
quote?
my favorite. My bright spot is, as I mentioned, the
Oh,
poker scene.
of course, fair.
Just because, well, I really enjoyed the atmosphere, and you've got the two Discord powerhouses really. not counting the luggage. It's Granny and Dad. My favorite
Indeed, yeah.
quote though, and I could sum this up in one line, but I'm going to go with the long version.
Do it.
There's your heavy opera where basically people sing foreign and it goes like, oh, 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 I am dying. Oh, I am dying. Oh, 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 that's what I'm doing. And there's your light opera where they sing in foreign and it basically goes, beer, 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 beer. I like to drink lots of beer. Although sometimes they drink champagne instead. That's basically all of opera, really. What? Either dying or drinking beer? Basically, yes, said Nanny, contriving to suggest that this was a whole gamut of human experience. And that's opera. Well, there might be some other stuff, but mostly it's stout or stabbin.
I mean, yeah, sums it up perfectly. I love that quote as well. If you hadn't got in first, I think it would have been on my list probably. Certainly, drinking and or dying are things that feature heavily in my own writing. So, like, I guess I got that from somewhere. Terry's given out the knowledge here. There was one though, and again, I've mentioned the whole way through that my memory of my first reading of this is hazy, to say the least. But this is a quote that jumped back out at me. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember reading this and this sticking with me, and that is, the IQ of a mob is the IQ of its most stupid member divided by the number of mobsters. So, that idea of like mob mentality, that like a person is smart but people are stupid, which is I think an idea that Terry comes back to a few times. I think this is maybe one of the first books I read where that was articulated so clearly, and we're no stranger to a mob in this part of the world, and unfortunately we've been no stranger to mobs in this part of the world recently. So yeah, that kind of stuck out to me a bit on the reread. Something that I think, one of those little lessons that I learned from Terry when I was young that stuck with me without me kind of realizing it. It sort of shaped me in a good way, hopefully. Sorry to bring the, we were having lots of fun there and I made it serious,
Do you know where I've been having lots of fun, PJ? I've been having lots of fun doing my YouTube review series on Star Wars Ahsoka,
Look
which
at that segue into a plug.
You may
that
have
was
no
masterful.
interest in Star Wars Ahsoka. You may have seen it and think, I don't want to watch a review series about that. Those are two entirely right attitudes to have to enjoy my review series. It's a terrible, terrible show, but I've been having so much fun doing these reviews, and I try and be as positive about it as possible. So please come and check that out. It's going to run throughout August, and then I will be reviewing the first series of Press Gang, Stephen Moffat's TV debut. And I'm also doing 200-second Always Sunny reviews weekly as well.
I have to say, it's an eclectic mix of reviews that you're doing. You're going from, modern Disney Star Wars all the way back to vintage 90s Stephen Moffat via one of the world's, I guess, most long-running sitcoms now. Almost Sunny's on series, what, 14 or 15 or more?
17, yeah. Debuting later this year, I believe.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, I definitely do recommend everybody checks out Andy's reviews. They're, as I say, eclectic to say the least. Lots of fun. Don't require much in the way of pre-knowledge. I will probably be writing to some degree about Ahsoka in my PhD thesis, so you might get referenced. Who knows?
Yes, PJ told me last month he has been accepted to do a PhD. That's starting soon. That might impact the podcast, but we're both keen to sort of try and keep to a monthly schedule as much as is humanly possible.
Indeed, you might just notice that.
Great news.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I might be relying on L-Space a little bit more often than I have previously. I might not make it through every single reread, but I'll do my best. Because I think it would be a shame to let the podcast drop off. So I've been really enjoying seeing the pieces come together, reading the books in order, something I've never done despite being a fan for about a quarter of a century. So yeah, very keen to keep it up in some shape or form. So stay tuned on developments on that front. What else are we plugging, Andy?
I've got well, we could plug Devil's Own. I've got some news, actually. I've got some news. I have a book that I'm working on. It's actually fully drafted.
Nice.
It's called Coastlines After Dark. It's very much inspired by Baywatch Nights. Think Garth Marenghi sort of stuff. YouTube legend Alison Pregler of Movie Nights. If you've seen a handful of Alison Pregler's videos, you'll remember her. If not, go and check out her stuff. Alison has written the introduction for it at my
Amazing.
request.
That's so cool.
And that just came in. She did a fantastic job. So that's all good for me to start sending the book over to Amazon when I get a day. So that should definitely come out in October or by October.
That's exciting. Yeah, so by the time this goes on air, we should be a few weeks away from that release date. So keep an eye out on that. Just give us the title one more time.
It's Coastlines After Dark.
Amazing. Sounds
I'm
great.
hoping I can have a dummy copy for the next episode to show off. Although
Fantastic.
Sean Duffield, who did my first novel, Axel America cover, is still hard at work on the
Fantastic.
Coastlines
Yeah.
After Dark.
We look forward to seeing that. Yeah, as Andy briefly mentioned there, my radio documentary, The Devil's Own, is been repeated one last time, I believe, about 2 weeks ago as we record this, which means that its life cycle on BBC Sounds has been extended once again. And you can find it if you go on BBC Sounds and check out John Maher's The Devil's Own if you're looking for a sort of slightly surreal, psychedelic, devil worshipy story set in the Troubles
Get
in
over
Northern
the
Ireland.
moral panics in Northern Ireland with an occult and edge
Yeah,
to them.
but we must stress that it's a completely true story. 100% approved by BBC fact checkers. And that getting this kind of thing past them is no mean feat, let me tell you. I have hopefully got a new project coming out on BBC television this time, which technically we can't announce just yet, but should be available to watch by the next time.
What if we get all of our audience to leave NDA compliance in the comments? Will you tell us in?
I'll tell you off air, and I'll just increase the anticipation for our loyal audience. Yeah. Yes. Well done. Yeah. But yes, hopefully I have something new to share on BBC iPlayer for you guys next time we speak. So until then, I'll let Andy do any final plugs before we.
Yeah. Thanks to our friends in the Pratt Chat podcast, and there's somebody on Twitter who keeps mentioning that they're catching with our episodes. Is it Mike? Thank you. You know who you are. You're listening to this. We really appreciate it.
Probably Mike. Was it Mike? Yeah, is it? Cool. We're really not good at this. We're nearly there. We're nearly done. Who else?
Our awesome top patrons, Arsalan Hyderali, Art K, particularly in Lawther, who goes Hoffers in the Zoom bill, which allows us to do this. We're on Twitter at Discord GNU, which is also our Facebook name. We're on most major podcast platforms. That's about it. I love reading Discord.
Yeah, nicely done. And just to point one last mention of our recently released filler episode, which I think is just a supercut of Weird Sisters, of Felmet in Weird Sisters, which is glorious, I have to say. So if you're on our YouTube channel or our Twitter, any of our socials, you'll find a link to that. If you haven't sat through all of Weird Sisters, this is all you need to see. It's great.
Yes,
good fun.
Yes,
good work.
Rob Rex draws over enthusiastic reading of Duke Felmet, which was just a joy. I think both of us felt that, and I just had to cut that together.
Agreed. Sterling work. So yes, you need that in your life. Go check it out. So yeah, Andy loves reading Discworld. I love reading Discworld. It's great to be back and seeing things fall into place in the correct order at the correct stage in my life when I can understand them. I feel I'm really growing as an adult and as a person, Andy. So, thanks for that.
Excellent.
Did he buy that? I think he bought it. Okay. See you next time, guys. Bye.